Alright, so this is not my typical desktop. Um, so I've been having some problems recently, and for, for I think the third time I've mentioned this, when I first started using Linuxes around the time of XP, just simply because I didn't like the way Windows was going, and I realized it's just going to get worse, which of course it fucking did. I started out on Debian, but as of maybe about 3 years ago, I realized Debian is really old. It's really not suited for desktop use anymore, especially if you use newer hardware. This laptop is 10 years old. It's a Studio 1557. But I have an AX200 Wi-Fi card with Bluetooth 4.2, I think. So I have some newer hardware. Now, that Wi-Fi card, according to Intel, should work with any kernel 5.1 and newer. So the problem is, and I've just recently realized this, Linux Mint Debian Edition and Debian itself, even if you manually update the kernel, which by the way is a fucking pain in the ass, it's really not working at all. I can't use my Wi-Fi or my Bluetooth. So I was looking at other distributions because of that, and the main reason why I'm trying to get away from Linux Mint is, yeah, even though I've always come back to Linux Mint in the past 3 years, no matter what else I've tried, with the recent release of Ubuntu, it's definitely getting worse, to the point where some of the packages I use can't install because there's an error in the dependency or some shit. One of them is B1 Free Archiver. Which is just right here. It's what I recommend if you use Windows. It's a great archiver tool. The other archiver tool I really like is actually installed by default here, and that is Arc. And that is because if you are trying to unpack any, I think it's PKG, it's the file format Apple uses and PlayStation, coincidentally. Arc actually works well for that. And I don't like having to have more than 2 of these sitting on my desktop. And unfortunately, with a lot of distros, you can't just uninstall something like this. It will remove too many dependencies. And this is a KDE tool, so of course it's going to be included in the KDE desktop. Now I have the icons only task manager instead of the window list, so it looks more modern. I really do need to find a new menu because I don't like the ones installed at all. I think this one is just, it works, but I don't like it. If we go to alternatives, and this has always been my problem with KDE, by the way, is this is just really big, clunky, and ugly in my opinion. There's no reason for it to be this fucking big and take up this much space. And then the third one is better, but I don't like having to go from here and shit. It's just not really something I like to do. And if I have the panel here on the top, it creates problems using this type of menu. Now, to be fair, this is a beta OS right now. MX Linux is predominantly using something called XFCE desktop. This is KDE. And my biggest problem with KDE was always the settings, which I can show you here. So the settings, if you don't really know what you're doing, which, yeah, I've spent more time in GNOME than anything, so I really don't. It can be kind of like they threw everything but the fucking kitchen sink at it, and it can be kind of confusing. I feel like I'm probably gonna try to get some new themes and shit installed. This is just a spare drive I have because I now have 3 fucking hard drives and shit. Usually I've been using this Crucial SSD lately. But what's really cool is that doesn't work for shit. Some of the shortcuts don't work for some reason. I'll have to let the developers know. Is even though this is based off of Debian, it's using a pretty new kernel, which is great because, well, you need the newer kernel for a lot of things. As I said, my Wi-Fi card needs a newer kernel, at least 5.1, and Linux Mint, Debian Edition, and Debian are using 4.9 still. We're at 5.7.8 is the latest stable. So, there are some cool things about using this, so I can just hover over that and see what my system load is. That's what that is. Again, it's a little clunky compared to Cinnamon. It's not as well polished. That's always been my problem with KDE. But it does look more like Windows than anything, really. But that's not a good thing. Windows isn't very polished to begin with. But that's what KDE has always gone for, is to look like Windows. I do like Cinnamon the best. I think the Cinnamon desktop is the best, but with the way Ubuntu is going and the fact that Linux Mint primarily is based off Ubuntu, I don't think Linux Mint is a viable option anymore. And as much as I would like to keep using Linux Mint, I could go to the Debian edition, but it is just as outdated and just as frustrating as Debian is nowadays. So because of that, I am looking to switch my Linux distro to something that I can actually use that is functional. But I want to stay in the Debian family because that is what I know the most. Coincidentally, I've always kind of had a problem with Manjaro and just installing it. Never mind the fact that I don't know how to use the package manager in Arch, because I never learned. And it's not very easy to learn, but I'll get into that in a second. The problem with Manjaro is, despite it being an open source distro, it's Linux, you need to use Windows, primarily Rufus, to put it on a flash drive just so you can boot it, which is fucking dumb that I can't use Balena Etcher or anything that I could download on Linux to test it out like every other Linux distro in the world. And then there's just the fact that if you're installing a package, let me just show you guys something real quick. So if you're installing a package, you do sudo apt install, and what's a package? Just randomly thinking. Blanking out right now because I'm still frustrated about something that happened the other day with the fucking TiVo shit. Let's say you wanted to install I don't know. Let's say KTouch. So this is how you would install it on a Debian-based system. So anything based off Debian or Ubuntu, that's how you install it. With Real, you take the apt and you replace it with yum install or DNF. So Red Hat, Fedora, it's DNF or yum. With OpenSUSE, it's just yum. So those package managers are very easy to use, especially if you're coming from Debian. The problem I have with Arch is it is not easy to transition. It is not easy to think, oh, I have to use this instead of this, just like I showed you. You have to learn an entirely new way of doing something, and that is kind of my problem with Arch. It's just convoluted shit. And that's why I don't really use Arch. And then there's the fact that every time I've ever tried to install Manjaro, it's failed spectacularly. The file system never exists on the flash drive, so I can't even boot into a lab environment. What's really cool is you have WaterFox in the repository here. WaterFox is basically Firefox. It's a fork of Firefox, but it doesn't have any of the telemetry in it. And it's also faster. It was originally designed to be a faster version of Firefox. And I can confirm, I'm just doing an internet speed test right now, even on Android, it is a better version of Firefox. So overall, I think, even though this is a beta, I'm going to keep my eye on this because I think I might want to live in this distro, metaphorically speaking. This is a very good distro so far from what I've seen. There are a few things I have to figure out, like how do I uninstall a package and shit like that, because on KDE it's not like Cinnamon where you can, or maybe it is. Nope. There is no way to right-click on a package and uninstall it. So I'm going to have to figure out how to uninstall packages because there are a lot of, holy shit, Clementine's on this. There are a lot of packages I don't want to keep. I thought Clementine was a dead package. Project, I meant. Not even loading either. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, I was pretty sure Clementine was dead. I don't think anyone's been keeping up to date on it. We have Muon, which, why? Like, seriously. I don't know why they have Muon over Synaptic. I think Synaptic works just fine. I don't know what iDevice Mounter is. I think that's for Apple devices. A lot of weird shit. Just install. I like that it has GUVC view out of the box instead of cheese. VLC I don't like using anymore. I prefer MPV. But I am going to need a better keyboard. Not keyboard, a better mouse. Layout, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. I don't like the Breeze mouse that I'm using right now. I'm also going to have to find a better looking one of these. It's going to be a process, but that's pretty much that. I do like the layout of KDE. The latest version of KDE is actually pretty good. I just wish they would polish some of this a little bit more, like they did with Cinnamon. It is a little difficult to figure it out, but I am going to figure it out because I have this hard drive lying around, and I'm going to fuck around with it. And I really like this version of MX Linux. I don't really like XFCE very much, even though it is one of my favorites and go-tos. simply because it's lightweight and it's just stable. But it's not very modern looking, and I really do like the modern look of things. I'd much rather have an icon here than a giant panel. I can actually show you what that looks like. So by default, KDE has uh, I think it's Task Manager. It looks like this, and that just takes up too much space, and it's like, why even bother? Um, so I do like this much better because it allows you to fit more, and it does look much nicer in my opinion. Um, but overall, it's just a few little things that I have to figure out. Um, but most likely, I am going to try this out. Now, one thing I did find is that even though this is based on Debian, and so isn't Linux Mint Debian Edition, if you go on Ubuntu's kernel website, their kernels are deb packages, and if you install them in the proper order, they will actually allow you to update your kernel on Linux Mint Debian Edition in Debian. So I'm going to try that here, and I'll make maybe a second video in a couple days after I fucked around with this a bit. And I'll let you know how that looks. Again, uh, it's not the worst looking desktop. It is much better than GNOME, at least on desktop. I don't like the way GNOME looks out of the box. I don't like the fact that it's very hard to theme, if not impossible. And I do like a lot of the improvements KDE's made. Originally, it was just kind of a mess. But a big problem of that is I don't know how to use it because I've always used GNOME. So I'm just going to fuck around with this for the next couple days, and I'll release an update. And I'll let you guys know how this goes. But so far, MX Linux is a much needed improvement for my needs. And that's pretty much that. I'm going to end the video now. And, what was I going to say? I'm going to end the video now, and I'll see you guys in a couple days when I figure this shit out.